7 American states are using water faster than nature can put it back. Some of them have decades, one city has months, and the state most people never worry about is far closer to the edge than you think. We are counting down from 7 to 1, ranked by how fast the water actually runs out. And at number 7, we have a state that gets more rain than almost anywhere else in the country. Florida averages around 51 inches of rain a year. It has ocean on 3 sides and swamps in the middle, and its own planners still warn that the drinking supply cannot keep up with demand. Almost all of that drinking water comes from underground. The Floridan aquifer spreads across roughly 82,000 square miles of limestone, and some of the water inside it fell as rain thousands of years ago. Groundwater supplies about 64% of Florida's fresh water. Homes, farms, factories, and power plants together pull billions of gallons out of that rock every single day, year after year. Now add people. Florida gains roughly 300,000 new residents every year. That is like dropping another large city into the state every 12 months, and every one of them needs a working tap. Federal estimates put Florida's fresh water demand by 2030 about 28% above 2005 levels. Officials have said openly that traditional groundwater alone was never going to cover a gap that size. Here's the part that turns it dangerous. Pumping the aquifer down lowers the pressure that holds the ocean back. Salt water then creeps inland through the porous limestone, moving toward the wells. In South Florida, the Biscayne aquifer feeds millions of people. Monitoring shows salt water has pushed miles inland in places, and some coastal wells have already been shut down because the water turns salty. Rain should refill the system, but pavement, rooftops, and drainage canals send it straight out to sea. Desalination can replace some of it, yet it burns enormous energy and costs billions to build. So Florida lands at 7. It is not empty. It is a rich, rainy state steadily losing the cheap water it was built on. The next state is losing water much faster. Coming in at number 6 is Texas, and the crisis there is not spread evenly across the map. It is concentrated in pockets, and in one corner of the state it is measured in months. Corpus Christi supplies water to about 500,000 people and one of the largest industrial complexes in Texas. Its 2 main reservoirs, Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon, sank toward 8% of capacity. 5 straight years of record heat and drought did most of the damage. City officials began discussing emergency curtailment, which means mandatory cuts for every single user, from ordinary households to petrochemical refineries. A desalination plant was supposed to save them. The price climbed from around $750 million toward $1.3 billion. The city canceled it in 2025, then scrambled to revive it. Even if a new version gets approved, the plant is unlikely to be running before 2028. That is a fix measured in years for a shortage measured in months, and the reservoirs will not wait. So the region did the only thing left. It started drilling. Cities, chemical plants, and ranchers raced to sink wells into South Texas aquifers that were never designed to carry that kind of load. In Nueces County alone, newly planned pumping projects could add up to more than 10 times what the state water plan considers a sustainable withdrawal rate. Rural families on shallow wells are watching nervously. Far north in the Panhandle, Texas farms are draining the Ogallala aquifer. In parts of that region, water levels have dropped more than 200 feet since large-scale irrigation began after the war. Down south, the Rio Grande Valley lost the only sugar mill in Texas in 2024 after irrigation water failed to arrive. 50 years of farming ended because the river simply did not deliver. Texas is enormous, so the whole state is not dry, but its edges are already hitting zero. The next state has no edges to hide behind because its water is finite and vanishing. At number 5, we have Kansas, and this one works differently. Kansas is not riding out a drought cycle. Kansas is spending down a savings account that took millions of years to fill. The western third of the state sits on the Ogallala Aquifer, the largest underground store of fresh water in the nation. It runs beneath 8 states, stretching from South Dakota all the way to Texas. That water is ancient. Recharge from rainfall is painfully slow out there, sometimes a fraction of an inch a year. Farmers pull it out far faster than the sky ever puts it back. Roughly 80 to 90% of the pumping in that region goes to irrigation. Corn, feedlots, and cattle turned a dry, wind-swept plain into one of the great food-producing zones on Earth. The bill is now coming due. In southwest Kansas, the aquifer dropped about 1.5 feet in a single year, and northwest Kansas fell more than a foot on top of that. Crews measuring wells found water sitting more than 480 feet below the surface at one site. Every foot lost means deeper pipes, more electricity, and higher costs just to grow the same crop. Kansas leaders have said it plainly. Forget 75 years from now. Some parts of western Kansas do not have enough groundwater left to last another 25 years at current use. When a well fails out there, the land does not just lose a harvest. It loses value permanently. Irrigated acres become dryland acres, and small towns lose the entire reason they were built. Kansas is fighting back with pumping limits, soil moisture sensors, and local management districts. But the aquifer will not refill in your lifetime or your grandchildren's lifetime, no matter what they do now. That is why Kansas sits at number 5. The clock is running out underground where nobody can see it. The next state can watch its water disappear from the highway in daylight. Number 4 is Utah, and the warning sign there is impossible to miss. It covers hundreds of square miles, and it is shrinking in front of everyone who lives along the Wasatch Front. The Great Salt Lake covered roughly 2,300 square miles in 1986. Today, the average is closer to 1,700. It recently finished a water year at its third lowest level ever recorded. State officials are blunt about the cause. Wet years and dry years cause short swings, but the long decline comes from consumption. Utah is simply using more water than its rivers bring down. Agriculture takes about 75% of Utah's water, with thirsty crops like alfalfa leading the way. Cities and industry take the rest, and residential demand keeps climbing as the population grows. In one recent stretch, Utah drew its reservoirs down at more than double the normal rate. Weak spring runoff, a brutally hot summer, and demand that refused to slow all hit at once. The lake matters far beyond the view. Its moisture feeds the mountain snowpack that stores the region's water, and dust blowing off the exposed lakebed settles on that snow and melts it early. Researchers estimate that dust has already shortened the ski season by roughly 2 weeks. That same snowpack is the tap for millions of people living downstream in Salt Lake City and beyond. Utah is also a Colorado River state, sitting in the upper basin. As the river shrinks, Utah's future share shrinks with it, even though its cities are among the fastest growing in America. The state is now floating remarkable ideas, including paying California to build ocean desalination plants in exchange for part of Utah's Colorado River allocation. That is how tight the arithmetic has become. Utah has money, engineering, and a hard deadline in the 2034 Winter Olympics. That earns it number 4 instead of something worse. Number 3 has almost none of those advantages and one enormous dependency. At number 3, we have Nevada. Almost everything about southern Nevada rests on a single body of water held back by one concrete dam in the desert. It is a textbook single point of failure. About 2.4 million people live in the Las Vegas Valley, and roughly 90% of their drinking water comes from the Colorado River stored in Lake Mead behind Hoover Dam. Lake Mead is the largest reservoir in the country by capacity. It has been draining for a quarter century, and it now sits around a third full, roughly 180 feet below full pool. In 2026, it slipped below 1,050 feet of elevation. That is the level where power generation at Hoover Dam starts running into serious trouble, and the water kept dropping from there. Federal forecasters expect the lake to break its 2022 record low and keep falling, with projections near 1,020 feet in 2027 and lower still the year after that. The absolute floor is called dead pool at 895 feet of elevation. Below that line, water physically cannot pass through Hoover Dam to Arizona, California, or Mexico. Nothing moves downstream at all. Nevada saw this coming years ago. In 2015, it finished a deep intake tunnel that draws water from 875 feet below the dead pool line so Las Vegas can still drink. Nevada also holds the smallest Colorado River allocation of any lower basin state, and it recycles nearly all indoor water straight back to the lake. Lawns have been torn out by the acre. Water managers say they hold roughly 10 years of supply between the lake and banked underground storage. That is genuinely impressive planning, and it is still a countdown attached to a shrinking river. Conservation cannot make it rain. If the river collapses, the deep straw does not matter. That is number 3. Number 2 is the state that experts call the most water-stressed in America. Coming in at number 2 is New Mexico. By one widely cited analysis, it uses about 95% of the water actually available to it, the thinnest margin of any state in the country. Groundwater provides roughly 80% of New Mexico's drinking water. Surface supplies are thin. The snowpack keeps failing, and aquifers get pumped harder every year to cover the shortfall left behind. The Rio Grande is the state's main artery, and it is dying in place. In the summer of 2025, the river through Albuquerque went completely dry for around 50 days. Officials expected it to dry again as early as May of 2026. A city of 500,000 people watching its river turn into a sandy trench is no longer a forecast, it is a photograph. Elephant Butte, the largest reservoir in the state, has repeatedly dropped to around 3% of capacity. Water evaporates and gets consumed far faster than the river upstream can ever refill it. Researchers found that only about 1/3 of the water New Mexicans consume is being replaced by snowmelt, rain, and recharge. The other 2/3 is coming straight out of long-term storage. Along the Rio Grande, groundwater reserves are dropping by more than 500,000 acre-feet every year. That is roughly enough water to supply every household in the entire state. State projections point to 25 to 30% less water by 2050. Scientists there avoid the word drought completely. They use the word aridification because droughts eventually end and this one does not. The fastest falling water tables sit beneath Clovis, Portales, Deming, the Estancia Basin, and Albuquerque itself. Small towns with shallow wells feel it first, and several already have, one dry tap at a time. New Mexico is not running out someday. It is drawing down the last of its reserves right now. And even so, there is still one state ahead of it, in worse shape than any of them. But number one is where everything changes: Arizona. A state that built millions of lives on borrowed water and now sits near the bottom of the priority list whenever the cuts arrive. In 2026, roughly 87% of Arizona sat in moderate drought or worse. The state logged its hottest start to a year on record, and its reservoirs never got a chance to recover. Underground, the picture is uglier. Between 2002 and 2024, the Colorado River Basin lost about 27.8 million acre-feet of groundwater, a volume close to the full capacity of Lake Mead. Around 2/3 of that loss came from the lower basin, which is mostly Arizona. No other state in the region has drained its aquifers as fast or as completely as Arizona has. Then comes the legal trap. Under a deal signed in 1968, Arizona accepted junior rights on the Colorado River. When shortages hit, Arizona gives up water before California gives up a single drop. Deliveries through the Central Arizona Project Canal have already been cut by roughly 512,000 acre-feet. Central Arizona farmers absorbed the deepest reductions, and many of them simply stopped planting fields. In Metro Phoenix, the state found there was not enough groundwater to guarantee the required 100-year supply for new subdivisions. Homebuilding that relied on groundwater in parts of the valley was frozen. Rural Arizona has it worse. Near Wendon, a 600-foot well ran dry. The owner spent $120,000 drilling a deeper one, and he cannot afford to do it twice. Meanwhile, lawmakers debate pumping rural aquifers and piping that water to Phoenix and Tucson. The rules governing the entire Colorado River expire at the end of 2026, with all 7 states still deadlocked. So there is the ranking: Florida, Texas, Kansas, Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, and Arizona at the very top. None of them go dry tomorrow. Every one of them is living on water it cannot replace.